What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Franchise Unfiltered podcast. Today, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Alan Regala. Alan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Wes. How are you doing?
Good, man. I'm glad. It's fun. This is going to be fun to do this. You and I have known each other for. Actually, Kelly told me this morning. I guess something popped up on like one of her social media timelines. But this day 7 years ago, we were at new franchisee training for ShelfGenie. So we are like
Wow.
right at our 7 year anniversary of becoming ShelfGenie franchisees, which in some ways it's like, man, I can't believe it's already been 7 years. In other ways, it feels like it's flown by.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, man.
That's amazing.
Pretty
Milestone.
cool. Pretty cool. But that's how you and I met was through ShelfGenie. You were a longtime ShelfGenie franchisee up until pretty recently here. You sold your ShelfGenie franchise business, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a year ago.
Has it been a year already?
It's
Wow.
been a year. Yeah, it's
Okay.
crazy. Time flies.
Yeah, it really does. So and you had that for what, at least 10 years, huh?
I
Or
was
close to it?
almost at 14
Oh,
years.
wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely long time. ShelfGenie franchisee, you were very successful. I'll say it because I know you won't brag on yourself, but you were the highest volume ShelfGenie franchisee, I think, for pretty much the entire time I've been involved with ShelfGenie, which, I mean, I went to work at the corporate office in 2016 or 17, and then we bought our franchise in 2018. So very, very successful with ShelfGenie. We're able to sell it, which again is something that is a huge accomplishment.
Thanks, man. Yeah. It was a long time. It was quite a ride, quite a journey, and I learned so much, throughout that entire process. Met a lot of good people, and
Yeah.
yeah, at some point it was just time to sell, and I'm glad I ended it and had a really just kind of overall great experience, and happily I was able to do that, and now just excited to kind of open the next chapter of life and see where that takes me.
Yeah, it's cool to see it come full circle like that. I think it's something a lot of people don't put a whole lot of thought into, when they're getting ready to start a business, whether it's buying a franchise or, just starting something on their own. But, most people, I don't know about most people, many people don't, start a business and own it forever. Like, people buy and sell businesses all the time. And I think in a lot of ways, it should be the goal, unless you want to hand it off to your kids at some point. But I mean, if you've built a business that is profitable and has value in someone else's eyes to where they will come in and write you a check to buy that business from you so that they can take it over and, hopefully grow it from where you have, like, that's what it's all about, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It was really interesting when I was at the meet the team day, 14 15 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Alan, the CEO at that time, had asked me, what's your exit strategy?
Yeah.
And I was like, I have no idea. Because he's like, what you said, he's like, nobody, these days plans to have this business forever.
Yeah.
And, kids don't typically want the business,
Yeah.
necessarily. So
Yeah.
like, what's your strategy? I'm like, well, I have no idea, and I asked him like, what's yours? And he said, well, I'll probably, run this for like 5 years and then sell it. And I said, that sounds good. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it took a
Well,
little longer, but
and he did, and you did, a little bit longer than 5 years for both of you from that time. But yeah, I mean, I think it should at least be, in the back of your mind, that, hey, because I think it's something that people should, you know, make sure there is a pathway to selling. Like, some businesses are easier to sell than others, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, that's something you should put some thought into. What do I want this journey to look like, right? You said chapter earlier, right? And I think that's, life is full of chapters, right? And so chances are, if you start this business or buy this franchise, it's not going to be forever. So what's your goal? And it doesn't mean that you can't change that goal, but what's the goal? Is it, I'm looking for something to do for the next 5 years, longer than that, but you should put some thought into it. And then assuming the opportunity to sell the business down the road is part of your goal, then really put some thought into, okay, is this a business that's sellable at some point if I build it the right way? Because
Yeah.
you've seen people, not really have much of a business to sell when they get to that point, whatever the
Yeah.
reason is that they're ready to exit and move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the reasons that it's really good to think ahead, even if it's far ahead, when you get into that space where you're a couple years out, maybe just, is your business, yeah, sellable? Like, what are the factors that make it sellable,
Right.
and how can you prepare it ahead of time?
Yes.
One of the books I read very early on that was recommended to me, the E-Myth
Yeah.
Revisited.
Yep.
I mean, it's so good. It's like, prepare your business like any business, like it's a franchise. So, all the systems and processes are in
Hmm.
place,
Yeah.
which obviously makes it very sellable if everything runs and you don't, need to be the one doing everything.
Yeah.
But then also just run it so that it runs so well that you may not even want to sell it because it's running so well.
Well,
It's so easy.
that's the thing, right? Is if you really do all of that well, you may get to a point where it's like, hey, I could sell this. It's very sellable, but I also don't need to, because it's not like I've just created this long-term full-time job for myself. And
Yeah.
it was kind of, so I came into ShelfGenie, I think it was 2017. It might have been 2016, but and they'd started franchising around 2007, 2008. So you were probably pretty early in terms of
Hmm.
when you became a franchisee. But um, I think there was a little bit of this kind of misconception that ShelfGenie was one of these businesses that you couldn't really sell, because up to that point, the franchisees that had, we'll call it, exited the business, they weren't really able to sell their business. They weren't able to sell it like you were able to sell it, where it was valued at some multiple of their EBITDA, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it was really just that up to that point, I mean, it was only a 7 or 8 year old franchise system at that time. The people that had exited were the people that were, doing okay, I guess, in the business, but they weren't really doing great, and they hadn't really built a business. Like, everything revolved around them. They as the owner were responsible for the majority of the sales that happened in their business, or there were some owners that did most of the installs in their business. And so that's kind of a recipe for burnout. I think for most people, you do that long enough, you're going to make some money, but you're probably not making enough money given the amount of time and effort that you're putting into it to want to continue doing it. But then that's very difficult to sell a business that revolves so tightly around you as the owner, because anyone looking at it's like, okay, well, you did $500,000 in revenue in your business, but it was all you. Meaning, if I buy this business from you, that means I have to come in and sell at least $500,000 myself,
Hmm.
or train someone else to do it. But you don't have the systems and processes there, to train a salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is about the systems and processes. And, I think going in, knowing what you want out of the business, like knowing those goals, like,
Hmm.
for some people, maybe they're fine with that. And that's actually, they're okay with that because they need
Yeah,
something to do.
yeah,
And like, they're happy to be in the day to day, and they're happy to be the business
yeah,
basically, without, and hopefully that's the person, they're not thinking like, I'm going to sell this for, a big multiple or something later, because
yeah,
that's probably unrealistic.
yeah,
Versus someone, if they do have the goal to eventually get to that point where they can sell it and make a nice profit, is, start early and start with these getting systems in place earlier. And it's just so much better to start like that from the beginning and get things put into place. Because um, I think this is before your time, but there was one franchisee in particular who was in San Diego, a ShelfGenie, and he was the designer and the installer
yeah,
and the owner.
yeah, yeah,
And he would get so busy, like he'd sell, and he would get upset because he was selling so much, because then he had to go install them all.
yeah,
And he never had time to hire,
yeah.
right? It's just this cycle.
The
This
hamster wheel.
crazy. It's a hamster wheel, and he never got out.
Yeah,
Well, he got out of the system eventually because he couldn't handle all of the work. I
yeah,
mean, it was very successful from a lead generation and a business standpoint, but because he was the only one doing everything and he didn't have the time to the systems put in place early enough, he just burnt out and couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like that approach may be okay for some people. So getting clear on what it is you really want to get out of owning your own business is super important, right? And it's going to have an impact on what is the right type of business for you. If you get clear on that piece first, but I can tell you from, being a franchise consultant for 5 years now, and then selling franchises before that, vast majority of the people that I've worked with, their primary motivation for wanting to make whatever pivot they were making and get into business for themselves was to have more control of their time and more flexibility, right? So
Yep.
if that's important to you, which I think it is for most people, if they're making this decision to leave a corporate job of some sort that pays pretty well, to go do their own thing, then absolutely make sure you're clear on exactly what you want that to look like for you, and then make sure that you get into a business that can realistically help you accomplish those goals, and start building the systems and processes, so that you can actually attain some of that time freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree. Even just, within ShelfGenie, when hiring people like designers, for example, or installers or whatever, it's like that time control of your time. That was probably the biggest thing when I was hiring. I would, I would, I would put in the ads, and when
Yeah.
I was talking to people on the phone and interviewing people, it was so many people found that to be one of the biggest attractors.
Yes.
Obviously, that for the time that they were working, they wanted to make good money, but
Yeah.
having that control and being able to set their schedule, do other things, having other gigs or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
that was huge.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think it's something that's important to most people, and probably more so now more than ever, because there are just more ways that people can set themselves up to make money, but not in like the traditional clock in, clock out, nine to
Yeah.
five type of role. We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. So I want to talk about, your decision to sell your business, and when you started kind of realizing that, hey, maybe it's time for me to really start seriously thinking about this. But before we do that, like, I think it'd be helpful for the audience to hear a little bit about what you did prior to owning your ShelfGenie franchise, and what were some of the motivators for you to even start considering business ownership for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I graduated in mechanical engineering long time ago from Cal Poly. Worked for a year. I was excited about working in the medical device industry. I was like,
Okay.
oh, this is great. This sounds kind of like this kind of startup kind of thing. And when worked in the very first month I was at work, I was like, I don't think I'm ready to work yet. So
Yeah, this is
like
a lot. This is a big
almost
commitment.
like immediately I applied for grad school like that same month. And then I worked for a year and then left and went to school to
Okay.
get my master's in engineering. I was like, okay, I just need to get, this out of the way. And so I did that, went to Stanford and went to work at IDEO, which is a fantastic design consulting company. I was doing amazing work. It was super fun, great environment and all those things, smart people. But again, it kind of, I enjoyed the work and the people, but there's still something kind of like, just never feeling like I was getting like paid what I was worth. You know what I mean? Like, and I was, it kind of didn't matter what the number was. Also, it was just like, I don't know. I just, and I was
Is it
helping
just
doing
did you
great work.
you knew you were capped, I guess, to some extent in terms of how
Yeah.
much you could make. So it's like, hey, I know there's a ceiling that I can't really break through, if I stay
Yes.
on this track.
And part of it was I was doing consulting, like design consulting work, engineering consulting work for these other companies, like Fortune 500 companies, startups, medical device companies. And I was like, I'm doing this work and I'm like, wow, if this works out really well, like it's really going to benefit these companies, which is great. But like, I'm not really seeing the bigger benefit of that if it is really successful, right?
Right.
And so, kind of like, I was in this mindset of like, I would really rather get paid for like the work. Like, if it's successful, I want to be more successful, you know? And then by chance, I had this guy in the accounting group came to me one day and he's like, hey, have you ever thought about, business ownership? And he handed me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And
Really?
and so I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I read it and I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. I read like the cash flow quadrant and I was
Uh-huh.
like, I really need to own a business one day. And then this guy was like, oh yeah, well, I've got this like multi-level marketing thing and blah blah blah. And so he got me into like this thing looking at, and I explored it and was like, oh, let me look at it. And then I tried it for a little bit. I was like, okay, this is definitely not for me.
This is not what I had in mind.
This
Yeah.
is not what I have in mind. But the concepts of these books were really solid.
Yeah.
And so that kind of is what started the idea of like, okay, you know what? Owning a business sounds like it has a lot of advantages. I mean, from a financial standpoint, obviously from those books, but from a time perspective, and just
Mhm.
again, it kind of related to the issues I was feeling earlier about being worth, getting paid what I'm worth, right? Um, so I started thinking about designing some of my own products, and I basically invented a product, a little widget. It's like credit card sized notepad with little sticky notes and a tiny little pen. And I patented it myself. I ended up leaving IDEO after a couple years and started this business like not knowing at all what I was doing, but thinking
Yeah.
like this is going to be some home run product. Got manufacturing set up overseas. I was going to trade shows all over the country selling this thing, and for this little $4 product, it really did pretty well for what it was. I had to
Yeah.
sell a lot of them, but I got them into stores like the Container Store. I got into Barnes and Noble.
Really?
Um,
I didn't know this.
I was selling it online. And then in 2007, the iPhone came out. And then I saw the writing on the wall and I was like,
Sticky
oh,
notes are
yeah,
not as effective anymore.
notes on the go, probably not going to be quite as, important in the future. So, and the product did well, but it wasn't the home run that I thought it was going to be. And what
Yeah.
I realized in meeting other entrepreneurs like on the road and who created products and other things was that the really successful ones, they had a whole line, and
Mm.
what they were creating was a distribution channel.
Yeah.
And then they created things to fill that, to add to that, to the distribution.
Right.
Versus one kind of thing where you think, oh, this is going to be amazing and it's going to like blow up and this will be it, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like, maybe it was like a double or, something like that. It did pretty well, but it, then something else comes out and all of a sudden it's not needed anymore,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So that's when we moved I was doing like consulting work on the side in addition to that.
Gotcha.
And then by the time we moved to Seattle for my wife's work, um, I was just like, you know what, I want to do something different. I really like the idea of owning a business, obviously, for several reasons, but I also like the idea of having a partner. Not just
Mm.
being me, which is what my previous company was. It was
Right.
all me, right? I was doing everything. Um, and so I was like, I had poo-hooed franchising, years before. Like I was getting Entrepreneur Magazine and I was like, oh man, like I was reading all the stuff on these entrepreneurs. And then I'd get to the franchising section and I was like,
Yeah.
those aren't real entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Right.
But, and it was crazy because then at that time I was like, when I had, come to the realization that like, you know what, this is actually perfect for me because I've got a built-in partner, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not just one person, but it's an organization. They have a proven business model. They've got the support. They've got all the help I need, and really I just need to execute, right?
Yeah.
So like, oh, franchise model is actually perfect for me. And so yeah, that was kind of the start. And and I used a franchise consultant
Okay.
at that time, and went through the process, kind of like like what you do,
Yeah.
and that's how I found ShelfGenie.
Yeah. I think there's something about like a well structured franchise that would appeal to someone like you that's very engineering minded, because so much of it is systems and processes. um I don't know, that's kind of my gut feeling on that, but I can see how, if that's how you're really wired, to go and be a mechanical engineer like you were, um franchising could be appealing. um I'm curious what other, so you worked with a franchise consultant. What other types of so that's how you got introduced to Shelf Genie, I assume,
Mm-hmm.
was through this franchise consultant. What
Yep.
other types of franchises were recommended to you or did you consider initially?
Yeah, several different types. So my number one choice was the hood cleaning business,
Okay.
which I was like, oh, this is amazing, and then it was purchased by someone else. There was a senior care business, and then the second choice actually was a disaster restoration company,
Okay.
and ShelfGenie was third on the list. So
Mhm.
I went out and I did a discovery day with the restoration company in Florida, and um, it was good, but for some reason, I just didn't feel like it clicked with the people at the
Mhm.
home office.
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, it just didn't feel like there was a match from there.
Yeah.
Like the business model seemed fine and everything else, but and so I visited on the way home. I went to Atlanta and visited Shelf Genie, had my discovery date there, and then I was like, these are my people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though it was third on the list, I felt that connection with them, and then that
Uh-huh.
became the top choice.
That connection's important, it's why, you should, if you're seriously considering a franchise, go meet with them in person. Go sit down with them face to face, because like you said, it's a partnership. That's what this is. At the end of the day, franchising, it's why it works when it's done correctly, is because it's a partnership and you've got alignment. And but yeah, you want to make sure that it feels like a good fit culturally, just as much as it feels like it's the right business, and will play to your strengths and your skill sets and things like that. Were you concerned at all about the fact that you didn't have any, let's call it, industry experience, right, with something like Shelf Genie?
I don't think I was ever nervous about that. I mean, it just the whole purpose of the franchise is, they have things, systems and processes that are put in place, and
Yeah.
so it's really just about learning. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm a pretty good learner. I can figure things out, and if they're there to support me, I wasn't really too concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. 100%. It's I think something a lot of people get stuck on, right? If they're working through a process similar to what you did, the tendency for many people is going to be to look at whatever the product is, right, and say,
Right.
well, what do I know about custom pull-out shelving or organization? And I mean, you, by the time we got involved in Shelf Genie, I mean, you were a thought leader within the organization. Like, you knew the technical side of that business just as well as the people in the manufacturing plant that built it, so you definitely were able to become an expert, but it wasn't necessary for you to already be an expert in order to get started with the business and start having some success.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the beauty of a franchise system, and um, I think the critical skill there is just being open and willing to learn.
Yeah.
And to be coachable. So
Yes.
that you
Yeah.
can be more effectively, or you can learn more effectively.
Yeah. And then there's this kind of evolution, right, where this is something I talk to people about, is they're really starting to investigate franchises, because most people tend to focus on the value that the franchise is going to bring for them in the beginning, right, which is super important, right, having the systems and processes there, that initial training, that support as you're learning the business and getting established. But you'll get to a point just like you did, just like Kelly's done with our ShelfGenie franchise, where you don't really need the franchisor any longer when it comes to like teaching you how to run the business, right? And in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, like, your successful franchisees are in some cases able to teach the franchisor things about how this
Yeah.
business could be run better, or like you were very innovative with a lot of what you did in your market, with developing referral partnerships and kind of call it grassroots marketing, things that are now best practices within ShelfGenie. And anyone that's coming through like new franchisee training, they're telling them like, hey, you need to be going out and doing these things. But you were kind of pioneering some of that, in your business back in the day. So it's something to think about though, right? Because I know people that are very bitter, as franchisees, because they're still paying royalties, but they're established in their business and they feel like they get basically no value from the franchisor any longer. So I think it's just something to look at and consider, right? Like, hey, how can this franchise continue to add value to me even when I don't have a ton that I can learn from them in terms of the actual business? With something like ShelfGenie, it's a custom product that they manufactured for us. So like the way I look at it today, 7 years in, the main thing I want from ShelfGenie is like make us a really good quality product and keep my prices as low as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's an evolution,
Yeah.
both your journey as a franchisee and how much you need the franchisor at the beginning, of
Mm-hmm.
course, to get everything up and running and to learn all the things that you don't know. Um, and then, yeah, at some point, I agree. It's, you've gotten, the training wheels are off, you're on your own and you're like, hey, I got this, right? And then at certain point you're like, oh, you know what, I know enough now, and I'm creative enough where I need to come up with some other things that
Yeah.
maybe the franchisor hasn't come up with yet, right?
Yeah.
And these are the things that you don't want a new franchisee to do at the beginning, because they think they know
Right.
what's going on, and then
Yeah.
they try other things, they don't follow the system.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't do that at the beginning. But once you're in it enough, and you start to make intelligent connections between things, and can really come up with some really cool creative solutions, as far
Yeah.
as marketing goes and sales and things like that. So um, I think that's part of the fun. Personally, that was a lot of fun. But also the franchisor is also evolving as well,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
depending on when you get in and how long they've already been open and how many franchisees they have, like, they're learning too. And so,
Yeah.
part of it is they want your feedback so
Yeah.
that they can share that with the rest of the system, and grow the system as well. Maybe come up with a new process, and they can modify the process for everybody.
Yeah.
So that happens too. And when it comes to like the royalty thing, honestly, like, it's really interesting because I just never paid attention to it. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I know from the beginning this is part of it, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to like, can I be happy with what I'm making, like
Yeah.
the return I'm making, the money
Yeah.
that I'm making? Can I be happy with that, right? And obviously, that royalty is just a part of that calculation. It's just another expense.
Yep.
And certainly, it seems like they are earning it more at the beginning. But there are things like throughout the course of their evolution that they're also putting in to help grow the system, and to
Yeah.
do better things for the system, and improve their infrastructure and whatever else they're doing. In ShelfGenie, it's like manufacturing. Like, how can they improving manufacturing, or providing that consistent quality product, and them dealing with all that instead of me dealing with manufacturing,
Yeah.
like I had in the past, which I would not want to do.
Right.
So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that can justify those royalties.
Uh-huh.
But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, can I make the money I want to make? Right? It's kind of like when we spend money on marketing. Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of money on marketing, but at the end of the day, I'll spend what I need to spend. Can I be happy with
Yeah.
the
And if
return
it
I'm getting?
pencils out, if the ROI that you're expecting off of that marketing spend pencils out, you do it. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the right way to look at it when it comes to royalties. Like I give this coaching when I'm working with people as they start evaluating, maybe 3 or 4 different brands early on. A lot of times, one may come back and say, well, this one has a lower royalty percentage than the other. And I'm like, don't even start comparing the percentages. Like it's not apples to apples. Like you need to, in terms of things like the royalty percentage or the franchise fee or the size of the territories or any of that, like there's really no point in comparing one franchise to the next. In my opinion, you want to look at it individually and just, if we're talking earning potential, you want to get a good sense of like, how much money do I think I could make in this business? Because I've
Yeah.
seen plenty of franchises where, you've got a franchise with a higher royalty percentage and their franchisees are probably netting a higher percentage than, on average than in a franchise with a lower royalty percentage. But for whatever reason, just the nature of the business or the unit economics, their franchisees can't actually make as much at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there with, it comes down to the money you want to make, right?
Yeah.
The royalties are a part of that, but at the end of the day, if you can make whatever number that you're shooting to make,
Yep.
it doesn't matter what those numbers are, those other numbers, you could have all the other costs of goods and, or, manufactured stuff or, labor. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Doing business.
It's the net. Like at the end of the day, for me, it's like, okay, gross, like what's the revenue? What's the net, percentage? So I can kind of calculate, what it is that, I can potentially make. And it really doesn't matter all the other stuff.
Do you remember, because so what year was it that you bought your ShelfGenie franchise?
2010.
Okay, so pretty early. They were a couple years into franchising it. Do you remember how many franchisees they had already at that point, roughly?
It was probably around, I don't know, 15 to 20 maybe.
Okay, all right. So a handful. It wasn't like you were, franchisee number 3 or number 4.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb though and say back then there probably weren't, too many franchisees that had built businesses anywhere near the size or the revenue volume that you ended up building your business to. Right. So as you're looking at, data they had in their FDD, speaking with franchisees with ShelfGenie at that point in time, how did you get to a point where you had the confidence? Like, I'm sure you're able to get a sense of like what your profit percentage could look like, but how did you get to a point where you were like, hey, even if I don't necessarily see an example out there today of the type of business I know I want to build, how did you get the confidence that you would be able to do it with that model? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the way that I answer that is like, you don't know what you don't know. And so I wouldn't say that I had the confidence. It had anything to do with confidence in me, like thinking I could do something and then actually doing it. It was more about what I was focused on. And what I was focused on, there's, like you have these KPIs for, any business, right? And it's like, okay, what are the things that I can control?
Yes.
That I can really focus in on. I hate waste. So a big thing for me is not wasting, right? So when I first started the business, I got, I intentionally didn't spend as much in marketing all at once as they wanted me to.
Yeah.
Because I started with the home show and I said, I'm going to run these leads. And I did like a newspaper ad or something else, but I wanted to go through the whole process with some leads, some real live clients, and then figure out like where issues were in my systems, as far as like measuring the install process and all that other stuff, the design, and then tweak all those things a little bit, and then be able to really open it up for more marketing and bring more leads. So that if I got a whole bunch of people and then I screwed up a whole bunch.
Right. You spend all this money to get all these leads and then you're learning on them and
exactly.
Yeah, it's waste.
So,
spoken like a true engineer.
So that was my prototype, right? It was like that prototype stage for phase 1.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, a couple months where I could get at least through one cycle.
Yeah.
And then that was in the fall of 2010. And then in January of the following year is really when I said, okay, let's open, floodgates. Let's do a lot more of these home shows and let's start doing more marketing. But I still held off. Like, I was, I was told like, oh, hey, this big fair at the end of the year, in the end of summer is really popular and it's huge. And I was like, we're not ready for that. Like, I'm going to hold off a year or two or whatever, but I don't want to get all these leads and then waste them all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's learn, how to do sales. Like, right. And that was a big thing for me at the beginning, was like, we were not closing. We were not doing a great job. I hired a bunch of people right from the beginning. Like, I hadn't even sold a job yet, and I had 2 designers. Right. So
Yeah.
we are all kind of learning at the same time. And, it basically took time to figure out how to do this. Like, that's where I'd say probably one of the biggest things for me was learning how to sell.
Yeah.
It was like talking to people at the home office and talking to other franchisees, reading a lot of books on sales. Like, that really, really helped. So eventually, got better at those types of things. And then, so that was, I mentioned those KPIs. So like revenue per appointment for us, that was, it's a big, probably the number one thing, right?
Yep.
For
Yep.
ShelfGenie people, how much money you make per appointment that you go to.
Yep.
So focusing on that. And I will tell you, throughout the rest of the 14 years, that was probably my top like thing that I would look at. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what are the other things? Oh, so, first you need to get people in the door. So marketing, like, where can I find leads?
Mm-hmm.
So focusing on leads for us, that was a lot of home shows,
Mm-hmm.
and then, newspaper and direct mail and all those other things. But a big focus was like, okay, we're bringing in enough leads. There's no marketing budget, because as long as it has that ROI, we're happy to spend as much. If it costs me $1,000 for one lead, it's fine. If it can make a $10,000 sale.
Yeah.
So the marketing, and then the sales or the design, we really focused on the design.
Yeah.
I never called it sales. It was all design work, right?
Yeah.
Doing what's best for the client. And then the installation. If we're installing and people aren't complaining and we're getting great reviews, that's done. Taken care of, like, right? That's like, hire good people, have them do a great job, and then that's done. Bring people in, sell it, install it. Like, those are my 3 things that I was focused on. And I just focused on those, and the results were what they were. I mean, I'll be honest, throughout the entire tenure of my career with ShelfGenie, I had goals, but they were really just based off of what I did the previous year.
Right.
It wasn't
You're
like
just trying to level up your own business. You didn't feel like
Exactly.
you were competing to be top in the system or anything like that.
Exactly. It was just doing the best with what we had, and let's get better every year. And that's just how I ran my business. And so it just happened. It just was what it was. And I remember talking to another franchise owner at one of the conferences. He's like, wow, we just surpassed $1 million that year. And he's like, wow, you really think $2 million is even possible? And, a couple of years later, and I was like, wow, that's great. And I never really looked at a ceiling. It was, again, just about getting better every year. How can I keep improving that revenue per appointment, which we did every year, which meant, how do we create better designs?
Yeah.
How do we provide a better experience for our clients?
It's
like
basically problem solving better, right? Because I know, like, in our ShelfGenie business, our best designers have had no prior sales experience, right? So it really is like, because it's one of these businesses where it's about the warmest opportunity you're going to have, right? Because someone has proactively reached out to us, whether they see you at a home show and come up and talk with you, or they see an ad that you've run somewhere, but then they fill out a form online or pick up the phone and call you, and then they literally invite you into their home, right? To look at, what solutions you can offer them. So, at the end of the day, is it sells? Yeah, technically, but it's problem solving, right? It's asking good questions. It's understanding, what are the pain points, and then how can we solve that? And the better you can solve that, the easier it's going to be for them to say yes and pay you to come in and do it. And that's the case with a lot of these franchise businesses out there. So, like, I very commonly hear from people, they're like, I don't want to do sales. I'm not a salesperson. And there's 2 things that I usually want to make sure they understand with that is, like, number one, it doesn't have to be like this hardcore, aggressive timeshare pitch approach to sales.
multi-level marketing, like
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean, some
doing.
businesses are going to require that, right? But if we know
Yeah.
that's what you don't want, then we can, make sure we're looking at businesses more like what we just described ShelfGenie is, where it's truly problem solving. And the other piece of that is assuming flexibility and time freedom is part of your goal. You shouldn't pick the business that you're going to own based on the fact that you don't want to do the sales, right? I love that you had two designers before you even opened and started, running sales appointments with ShelfGenie. Do you want to learn how to do it yourself in the beginning as the owner? Probably, but the goal should be to scale yourself out of having to, be the primary salesperson as quickly as possible. In my opinion, if again, flexibility and time freedom is part of the goal. We'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, having those systems in place and having the people in place, if that's your goal, like my goal was to have a team. And so I hired installers while I was in training. I had my Craigslist ad
Nice.
out. And one of those installers was with me for 13 years.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah. And then, on the design side sales side, it was a little more tricky. But I went through a lot of different people because I had no idea what I was doing
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah. I think you get better with any of these businesses. You get better at really learning who's going to be a good fit for the different positions you need to fill on your team. You get better at recognizing quicker when someone's not the right fit instead of, letting someone sit in the wrong seat for too long. But so at what point did you start thinking, okay, this has been good. I'm having some success. I'm getting, a lot of what I set out to do. I'm getting a lot of this out of, owning my business. At what point did you start thinking, hey, might be time to start thinking about selling it?
It was actually at one of the neighborly reunion little workshops that they had, I guess, or they had some presentations on, and it was about preparing your business for selling. So that was really nice that Neighborly put this thing on, and it's just like how to get your business ready, make sure your financials are in order, and here's the process, and here's all these other things, and that was kind of just put in the back of my mind, and I ended up contacting the presenter and just picking his brain just a little bit, just to see kind of what get a few more details on it, and get an idea of like, what do you think I could, sell my business for? And then I was like, actually, I might be okay with that. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was like the first kind of step. But, and then in the following years, it was really interesting. In talking to friends that I had that, let's say, like, I have a friend who was in the construction business, and he was like, yeah, I'm very successful. Like this last year, it was great, but I know what I need to do to get to the next level, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. He got in touch with one of his buddies that was starting an indoor golf simulator business, not franchise, but it sounded so cool. Like just talking to him about it, I got super excited, and then I was like, I haven't felt that kind of excitement in a while.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not the excitement I feel on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
I always enjoyed working, within ShelfGenie, and meeting with clients was great, but that level of excitement inside of me, I was like, whoa, this is like this is something that's been missing for
Yeah,
a
the
while.
idea of doing something new, building something again was exciting to you. And I definitely see and like your point about, hey, I know what needs to happen to take this business to the next level, and I just don't think it's what I want at this point in my life. I mean, we talked about it earlier, chapters,
Mhm.
ShelfGenie was a big chapter in your life, but kids are getting older and stuff like that. I mean, like, you probably had other things, on the personal side of your life that you wanted to make sure you had time to do. And it's like, you got to weigh these decisions. Do I want to put in the time and energy and effort that's going to take this business from where it is now to that next level? And does that line up with, other things that you want to spend your time doing? I think that's a very natural progression, for business owners to go through.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I was really happy with where the business was at. I mean, honestly, all the years leading up to it, I was like, I'm happy with the business, I'm happy with the money I'm making, and me having a team in place and being able to do the things I want to do, go play tennis tournaments, all over
Yeah.
the country, all over the world. I felt very fortunate to have all those pieces in place, but yeah, I felt like, what, uh, I've never done any one thing for so long, and for me, like, I just need to change
Yeah. New
and
challenge.
a new challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Um, from the time you kind of, officially said, okay, my business is for sale, about how long was it until you had a signed contract to sell your business?
Um, I forgot one important piece here that helped me along this process, which was I have a tennis friend of mine, who contacted me um, the summer before I ended up selling, and he was actually interested in buying a business, like an existing business, and he was just curious to know if like, just talk about franchising in general. And so, because he was considering, franchises too, and I had no intention of selling at that time, but we got to chatting, and I helped him out, provide some information, and then we got to talking, and then eventually it was like, hey, I might be interested in selling my business, like, let's talk. And so we actually went pretty far down the path together,
Yeah. Yeah.
without any kind of brokers or anyone like that. It was just us two,
Yeah.
and we got to a point where at some point he was just like, I just don't think this isn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I mean, no harm done. It makes sense for you. That's fine for me. But you know what? I've gone down the path now, and my mindset was already
Flip
kind
some
of
sort of a switch in your mind, right? Where you're
yeah,
like, I'm selling this business, or I like the
exactly.
idea. Yeah.
And so I was like, I'll just, I'm going to put it on the market. And so that's what I did. And by the time I first put it on the market, I would say it was kind of kind of like a September timeframe. And it ended up, we got some inquiries at the beginning, but then the holidays came around,
Yeah.
right? So they slowed back down.
Yeah.
And then January picked back up again. And, I think we signed an LOI, and maybe it was February, and everything was done, it was official switchover date was May 1st
Okay.
of last year.
Was was it tough to mentally stay engaged over that time frame? I've seen this happen with business owners, right? Where they make that decision to sell, and then it's like a switch kind of flips in their heads, and then they kind of take their foot off the gas, with their business, and that can have all types of negative impacts, right? I mean, depending on how long of a period of time it is and how much they take their foot off the gas, it can, have a negative impact on what your business would be valued at. Was that a challenge for you at all? Just, mentally staying engaged until it was officially done and no longer your business?
No, for me, not for me. I mean, if anything, it actually had the opposite effect,
Mm,
in which I was really focused on, well, one, I wanted to make sure this actually went through, right? Like,
yeah.
I have a goal in mind. Like, what can I do to, what's it within my control to make sure that this is the highest likelihood of happening,
Hmm.
right? And so I need to keep things going, right? Make sure the business is running, do all the same marketing I was doing before. If anything, I was trying some new things. I was actually spending some money on testing some new things because I wanted the new owner to be successful.
Sure.
And I wanted my team to be successful. That was a
Yeah.
big part of it. Like, I want
Yeah.
this to continue on, and I want everyone who's been working for me that's been fantastic and I loved. Like, I want to take care of them.
Yeah.
And so, it didn't make any sense at all to kind of sit back and like take the foot off the gas and that sort of thing. If anything, I was like hitting the accelerator a little more just to make sure things were set up well. And I was actually documenting a lot of things. Like, I was setting up a system. I used Trainual, setting up our own internal training system.
Yeah.
I had set that up, like started setting up the year before, and to train designers.
Right.
And so I was adding to that, and every little process that I was doing, I was adding to that, and I was trying to get my team involved in being able to really build that out so that I could have all those systems in place for the new person.
Yeah, that's awesome. What did the transition look like? I mean, these are, I think, logistics. We sold a franchise at the end of 2023. So there's logistics that come up that can be tough to navigate. Like, when do you tell the people on your team that you're selling the business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tough one because you don't want them to get scared and jump ship, right? I mean, usually the team is a pretty, critical part of why someone's interested in buying the business. They want to, essentially inherit people that already know what they're doing. So you don't want to start losing people. The buyers want to as much insight as they can into, okay, who's on this team that I'm going to be inheriting. So like, I remember that was a little bit of a sticking point for us, when we were kind of in the final stages of negotiating. The buyers like wanted to meet the team, and we were like, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll meet them after they're your employees, but I could see where they were coming. If I was on their side of the table, I would too. I would at least ask, so there's things like this, there's the actual handoff of the business, jobs in process, how does that go? All of which should be accounted for in a good, purchase agreement. But were there any, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, were there any challenges that came up in those kind of final stages of finalizing the deal that you didn't anticipate, or that looking back on it, you're like, man, that was tough, and I didn't realize it was going to be that tough?
It was overall, it was a really good collaborative experience. I think I was fortunate in I had a broker who was really great, Sally from IBA, who really helped me out, and the buyer was really great. Like, he has and his partners are the ones who purchased it, and it was just a very collaborative experience. So we came across things like, okay, how are we going to handle this? And then we would talk about it. Like, here's a concern I have. And the question was always, how can I achieve this? How can we figure this out? And so when it came to like the people side of things, right? Like, you're absolutely right. Someone's buying a business, they want the team that's in place, right? Obviously. And so the biggest one for us or for the buyer was going to be the manager, right? Noelle.
Yeah.
So she was a critical piece, right, to this. And so we figured it out, and we said, you know what, I'll talk to her ahead of time, ahead of the closing. And part of the agreement was that, she signs a work, agreement to so that she'll continue on contract. Which I thought was totally fine. So so that was difficult. Like, letting the people know was definitely the most difficult part. And so we had, dinner. She brought her partner. I brought my wife, and we had dinner. And she didn't know, what was happening, but it was very, bittersweet. She was, happy, for me, but then at the same time she was sad, and there were some tears involved. But at the same time, it was kind of this like, hey, this is an opportunity for you to step up. Like, this Definitely. And so it was a promotion for her. and so she was like, yeah, let's do it. So
Well, yeah,
that,
and her being able to kind of really see like she was instrumental in helping you build this business that has enough value for someone else to want to come in and buy it, and she's critical enough and all that that they wanted to sign a contract, saying she's going to stay on, right, and not
yeah.
leave because you're not the owner anymore. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of this because I just think it's things that, and like we talked about earlier, most people that are, just kind of in the process of deciding if they're going to own their own business, they're not thinking about these types of things. And, it's not that you have to have it all figured out exactly when you're going to sell your business and, all the logistics of what it's going to look like. That's impossible to know. But I think it's just good for people to hear a little bit of this experience that you went through, so they have some expectation of like, hey, this is what it looks like to build and eventually sell a business.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great experience. I had obviously had never been through it before, but I think I had the right mindset going into it, especially going into the sale of like, this is a great business. I know it's worth, a good amount of money. And, I was with my broker, and it's like, yeah, I want to find someone who's going to take care of my people and
Yeah.
who will be, able to kind of build on it. And it was about coming up with a fair price and a fair deal rather than me trying to, be greedy, ultra
Right.
greedy.
Yeah. Squeeze every penny possible out of it. And yeah, I mean, I think in this type of business where, you built a very nice business, but, relatively small team, right? To the point where like you knew everyone on your team pretty well. We're not talking like, big corporation with hundreds or thousands of employees or anything like that. That's a big consideration. I know like, Kelly and I have kicked around the idea of selling our ShelfGenie franchise, and we will at some point, right? We're 7 years in. Nothing lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the one thing that she gets caught up on real quick, is she's got some really, really close relationships with people on our team. And
Yeah.
and that's, if and when we get to the point of making that decision, that's going to be the hardest part for her, without a doubt. But well, man, congratulations on the success selling your business. Tell us a little bit about what the next chapter's shaping up to look like for you.
Well, for me, I took what, I don't know, 6, 7 months off, played a lot of golf and tennis. And now it took me, that long to figure out, okay, here's what I'm going to be doing next. It's come full circle, which is great. I started this whole journey seeking the help of someone that would a franchise consultant like you, who helped me through this process. And so, that's what I'm going to be doing as a franchise coach,
Mhm.
and helping people kind of get through the process of matching them, and trying to share my expertise that the things that I've learned to become a good franchisee and to be successful in the business. Um, and yeah, it's called Athlete to Owner,
I like it.
franchise coaching.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think it's a great fit for you. And look, I think just like in most things, right? If you're going to have a coach of any sort, like you want a coach that's done it themselves, right? And is not just teaching from, theory or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, you've bought the franchise, made that transition, built the franchise. Um, I think you may have even had a fumble along the way with a different franchise, right? So
Hmm.
learning lots of lessons learned. Like all of these are things that anyone you work with is going to be able to benefit from. Similar to what I think I'm able to bring to the table for the people that I work with, and so yeah, man, I think it's a great fit for you, and excited to see how things go, but. And are you gonna? I know you talked about this. Are you gonna do a podcast yourself?
That's the plan.
All
That's the
right.
plan. I want to start that soon, and hopefully have some cool guests like you. You're my inspiration.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got 0 followers, 0 listeners now, so I got to start from
You got
somewhere,
to
though,
start
right?
somewhere. Well, do you know what it's going to be called, or when people can expect to be able to go check it out?
You know, hopefully, by the time this is out, it'll be up and running. But so very soon, in the next couple of weeks,
Awesome.
athlete2owner.com is the website, and you'll be able to find links to it. That'll be the name of the podcast too,
Okay,
Athlete to
cool.
Owner.
All right, well, we'll put all those links in the show notes and social media handles, anything like that. We'll make sure to make it easy for people to get, and we'll point them your way. But super excited for you, man. And again, congratulations on bringing this whole thing full circle. It's really cool to see.
Thanks, Wes. I appreciate it and appreciate your support. And it was fun being on here with you.
Always. Thank you.
Thanks.